This is your story. This is my story. But most of all, this is the greatest story ever told. This is God's story. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David."
When my son Stephen was a senior in high school a few years back, he took a class on film criticism. Now, they didn't have classes like that when I was in high school, where the fundamental idea of the class is to watch movies. I tell you, school would have been a lot more enjoyable experience if I could have watched more movies. After you're done viewing the movie, you write a critique based on 6 categories. First, there's the setting, the place and circumstances where the story unfolds. Second, you have the characters. Who are the main characters of the story? Then you identify the point of view. From whose point of view is the story being told from? Then there's the plot. There are actions that take place that cause the primary conflict. Next, we have the resolution. The story is being brought to some conclusion. The conflict is being resolved either positively or negatively. Finally, there's the theme. There's an overarching theme to every good movie. Like in the movie Shawshank Redemption, the theme is, you guessed it, redemption. Here's the setting for the story. Toward the end of King Solomon's reign, he got real aggressive with building projects and ships. And to pay for it, he overtaxed the people and forced them to participate in hard labor. Solomon dies and the throne is passed to his son, Rehoboam. This is where our story picks up. Who are the main characters? First, we have Rehoboam, Solomon's son who takes over the throne. He's from the tribe of Judah. Second, we have Jeroboam from the tribe of Ephraim. So you get the sense that naming a kid with Boam at the end of a name was pretty cool back then. Rehoboam, Jeroboam, Randyboam, Maxaboam, Jacoboam, Bobaboam. I dare you to try it using your own name. We first learn of Jeroboam in 1 Kings chapter 11. He was a young man and an officer in Solomon's cabinet who was very successful and capable. A prophet tells Jeroboam that he's going to make him king, but not now. Apparently Jeroboam doesn't wait and he rebels. Solomon attempts to kill him, but Jeroboam escapes and flees to Egypt. Point of view? There was a movie that came out a few years back called Vantage Point. It basically re-showed the same dramatic scene, a bombing, from the vantage point of about 4 different characters. Each angle brought the viewer a different insight on what really happened. Now in the Bible, there are 2 points of view in every story. There is the lower story point of view and the upper story point of view, or how we see the story unfold and how God sees the story unfold. Let me start first with the lower story point of view, how it could have been written up in the Jerusalem Post. Here's the plot. When Solomon dies, Jeroboam feels that this might be a good opportunity to come back home and to appeal to Rehoboam for relief. When he stood before the king, he said, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." King Rehoboam consults the elders who served his father Solomon. I love the way they put their counsel. "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejects their advice. He then goes to the young men he grew up with and who were now serving him. This is just a crazy idea. Not only are they young and inexperienced, but they are totally set up to tell the king what he wants to hear. Essentially, they say, "Make their yoke and burden become even greater." Well, King Rehoboam goes with this advice of these younger men. That is the plot that has all kinds of conflict you can shake a stick at. Now for the resolution. How is this conflict resolved, either positively or negatively? It is resolved by the nation being divided, torn in two. Jeroboam takes the 10 tribes of Israel to the north and forms a new nation called Israel. He becomes their king. Rehoboam stays on as the king of the 2 remaining tribes in the south, Judah and Benjamin. Their nation is called Judah. Now for the theme. What is the overarching theme of the story? A house divided against itself cannot stand. Jesus said that when some of the teachers of the law were suggesting that Jesus was casting out demons by the power of Satan. Jesus said Satan is smart enough to know that if he casts out his own, his enterprise won't make it. Apparently human beings are not that smart because we do this all the time. You know, life is hard enough dealing with all the outside influences. It's just plumb crazy that the people of the same family, on the same team, would turn on each other. That house, Jesus said, is doomed to fail. And fail it did. The once mighty nation that God built from scratch, that was the talk of the world, unstoppable in all ways, has now been severely weakened, not by an outside enemy, but from within. We see the same thing happening in our day with our families, our neighborhoods, our churches, our cities, and even our nation. When we are divided within, we will eventually crumble. That is the theme in the lower story for us to walk away with today. But if we change the point of view, there's even more. If we look at it from God's perspective, we see the plot unfolding in a little different way. Looking on this story from above, we are told that when Rehoboam decided not to listen to the people, that this turn of events was from the Lord. After Jeroboam rallied this huge insurrection and became king, we are told that Rehoboam mustered up 185,000 young men to engage in a civil war. God sent this message to stop them in their tracks. Do not go up to fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing. It appears from the lower story that the cause of this conflict was Rehoboam's decision to listen to the younger counselors and ignore the needs of the people he served. And God certainly used this human event, but the ultimate cause was God. And this leads us to an even greater theme. A house divided against God cannot stand. God made this decision back when Solomon was still king. Solomon let his many foreign wives turn him away from worshiping God alone. He let his heart follow after and worship other gods. Here's what we learn at the end of the last chapter of the story. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord. the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow after other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." God has been more than patient with Israel. He was doing his part perfectly, blessing them, expanding their territory, and the list goes on. But Israel failed to do their part. Solomon so distorted Israel's worship of God with the worship of other gods that no one would credit this incredible community's rise in strength to the name of Yahweh. Israel was completely distorting the upper story plan of God to reveal his promise, his presence, power, and plan to get all people back. The severe weakening of the nation of Israel into two would make sense to the outsider as they looked at the facts. Whenever Israel was fully devoted to God, they prospered. But when they divided their loyalties with other gods or interests, they were weakened. Now, as the movie comes to a close, we know there's a sequel. Like the famous Lord of the Rings trilogy, we know there is more to the story. But for now, the credits begin to roll. We can get up and head to the car, or we can sit still for a moment and ponder the power of both themes in our own lives. In the lower story, a house divided against itself can't stand. We need to do our part to make sure this is not happening in our home, in our church, or our nation. In the upper story, a house divided against God can't stand. To experience the full blessings of God, to ensure that everything works out for the good in our life, we need to love God above all and align our lives to his upper story plan. Before we get up and throw away the empty bag that once contained popcorn and fish around for our keys and get into our car, we need to whisper this prayer to God. Thank you for your provision over my life. Today I stand fully devoted to you. I don't want to have division in my lower story or with you in the upper story. Give me the strength to make good on that promise. Amen.